This is probably not going to amount to anything, but I figured it would be worth talking about anyways. Sony is being sued over PlayStation Store prices yet again. So basically, just to give the TLDR, basically when physical media was being sold, it was being sold to us as like, hey, here's the game, you chuck it in to your console, you chuck the disc in, you play it, you have fun. And you return the game if you don't like it, or if you want to swap, trade it with someone else, you can give them the game instead, or whatever have you. But the thing is that ever since digital distribution has taken over, the very idea was that, or at least the pitch to the consumer was, hey, you don't have to pay for discs anymore, so we don't have to pay for the creation of physical media, and ultimately the consumer is going to receive some amount of discounts in that way. But the thing is that games have never fallen in price in any way, shape or form when it comes to not being sold as physical media, and in fact prices have only hiked, hijacked and moved up further, especially with things like the addition of additional transactions within the games themselves, whether it be microtransactions, season passes, battle passes, loot boxes, gacha games. It's just been an endless cycle of just prices going up and up and up. But it looks like something is happening in Dutch court apparently. Whoops, that went somewhere else. Something happened in Dutch courts. Now, before I get into too many details though, worth keeping in mind that I don't think that this suit is actually going to go anywhere, and I don't think it's actually going to change anything. But hey, if it does happen to change anything and prices of games do end up dropping, I would say that that's a positive. But the reason why I'm making a video about this is more or less for posterity, at least from the perspective of a PlayStation player, because I would love for prices to go down of games, especially since they're so damn expensive in like certain regions. But of course, if this happens to in Dutch court, like say that they actually find Sony guilty, for example, and Sony weren't able to defend themselves, and then they were forced to do something because the government said so, it would only be those countries that would be affected and not anyone else. So even if something does happen, it might not necessarily affect other countries in the world, because again, countries like where I live and Australia and stuff like that, like, games are really, really damn expensive. In fact, it's more expensive than it is for Americans, which is just absolutely rubbish. But I digress. Pricing of games here suck. But let's talk about it. So, Dutch Consumer Foundation, Massachusetts and Consument has filed a lawsuit against SIE, similar to lawsuits the company faced in other countries, due to company restricting digital game purchases from third-party retailers, creating artificially high prices. Now you might be thinking, okay, what does third-party retailers mean? Effectively, it just means you are only allowed one storefront on the PlayStation, and that is the PlayStation Store. And this has been the same argument that's been made in the past, exactly as I've mentioned. And of course, because they're the only game in town, the perception is that prices are artificially high. And all I have to do is a quick Google search of the difference in how much I'm paying versus the guys in the US, and I can see a clear difference that obviously I have to pay more in my store. So that's why when it comes to PlayStation Store games, even though I know I don't technically own them, I still buy them at extremely cheap prices. I normally wait for like 80 to 90% off before I even decide to get a game on the PlayStation Store. But yeah, so this comes from Dutch outlet Tweakers, I love the name, translated by Vibrant Storm on Reset Era, in which the Foundation claims SIE is abusing the market for its digital games. PlayStation games are only digitally available through the PlayStation Store and cannot be purchased via a code from a third-party retailer, which can be done for platforms like Nintendo Switch and Xbox Series S and X. And I certainly have seen those cards around. And we're not talking about cards that give you credit. No, these are cards that actually feature the codes for full games. Normally they hide them like say for example, if I go to the nearest EB Games, they're normally hiding behind like the glass behind the counter pretty much, and so the only way to get into it is if the staff member actually has a key and opens it up and stuff like that. So that's kind of what you're expecting to see. The Foundation's research has found that this has allowed companies to sell digital games at an average of 47% more than its physical releases, and I would argue that 47% really just shows that people would much rather pay a higher price for convenience than go out of their way to get games physically, which is ultimately what's killing physical media, I think, in the grandest scheme of things, just because pretty much it's just saying people are lazy. Yeah, that's exactly it. According to the Foundation's research, digital games cost an average of 47% more than their physical counterparts, despite Sony having lower distribution costs. Reason to translate article. Oh, okay, this is what I was talking about earlier. About how digital media was pitched as like, oh, you can pay for less when it comes to games. Organization argued that the closed ecosystem of PlayStation Store combined with Sony's dominant position. Okay, the dominant position doesn't really mean much if people are playing on PlayStation, because they already have a goddamn PlayStation, goddammit. Anyway, so that doesn't really make too much of a difference. But Dutch PlayStation users who made purchases can join the collective claim, and if something happens, then only those people who, you know, are in countries like Portugal, for example, that would actually, you know, countries that speak Dutch, because I don't know those off the top of my head, would be able to actually benefit from if there was any action to be taken from all of this nonsense that's going on. I say nonsense only because, like I said, I have very little confidence that this is actually going to go anywhere, and ultimately it's just probably going to fizzle out. And if anything does happen, again, only the countries involved with the suit or who are partaking as part of the suit is going to be actually able to do that. Now, I do know there was something that was happening in the UK, but I can't remember exactly, and it looks like this article might touch on it a little bit. So I mentioned in the article, company faced lawsuits in other countries, yep, like Portugal and the UK. The UK Competitions Appeals Court greenlit its case as market-dominant companies like Sony must ensure fair competition under law. The company previously faced a similar lawsuit in the US as well. Okay, here's an interesting question I want to pose to everyone, and this is definitely going to be something I'll ask people to comment on in the in the comment section below. But how can PlayStation/Sony be considered the market leader if somehow Xbox is the one that's hurting itself in the long run, in the short run, and even in the medium term? In the short term, Microsoft hurt itself, Sony gets ahead. In the medium term, Microsoft hurt itself, Sony gets even further ahead. In the long term, Microsoft kneecaps itself, shoots himself in the foot, can barely function anymore, and Sony moves further ahead. Sony is only doing better because Microsoft is sucking ass so bad in the actual competition section that somehow PlayStation would have to kneecap itself in order to even make the competition fair anymore. So at what point do we kind of look at this and say, it's not completely Sony's fault, it's just mostly Sony's fault, and the rest of the blame lies on Microsoft being so ass at console competition for some reason? I don't know, take that for what it's worth, but I can't imagine it being taken in any other way, but I digress. Well, with that energy out, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 500 subs by the end of the year. With all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.